The music that they did with it was fantastic. Like, it remains some of my favourite music to listen to. Hello my loves, and thank you for joining me. It's Kirsten and it's time for my Smash or Pass May reading wrap up. Just saying whether I would smash or pass the books. I don't do star ratings, so I just give you my thoughts on them and whether I'd smash or pass. Nice and easy. So there's a couple of mentions that I have to do this month. Actually, I did finish my May TBR, which I'm really impressed with, but I do have one of them which was a sort of DNF. It was my reread, which was Electro by Jennifer Saint. So this is a reread, so technically not a DNF, but also I started it, I got to part 2, page 104, and I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't in the mood. I know exactly what happens in this one. It's obviously because it's a reread, but this is a Greek myth retelling of Clytemnestra, her daughter Electra, and also Cassandra, and this is all to do with the Trojan War. So Clytemnestra is Helen of Troy's sister, Cassandra is Paris's sister, and you're seeing the 3 lives of these women, how dreadful it is. Like, it's Greek myth, it's very depressing, and I just wasn't in the right headspace to read that and reread the toxicity between Electra and Clytemnestra and everything that goes alongside it. So it's one that I know I was rereading it for a book club that I'm a part of, but yeah, I couldn't face rereading it, so I decided not to. Yes, it counts as a DNF, but because it was a reread, also no. But yeah, so I got a little bit into this, and thankfully because I have already read it, I can chat about it for the book club. Other than that, what other DNFs do we have? Oh, we have one more DNF. Actually, saying that, I should say whether I'd smash or pass this. Normally, this is a smash because I love this book so much. It's just I couldn't face it during the time. It wasn't the right time, which is unusual for me. But the other DNF is The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, and this is a pass. I could not get on with the writing style of this one. I can understand why it's such an acclaimed piece of work. If you look at it from a literary critic point of view, it's criticising the work ethic within society, consumerism, and everything that goes alongside that. We're following our main character who wakes up as this bug. It's not specified, it's just he wakes up as this giant bug and he's got to try, and well, his first thought was, I need to get to work. Like, I have to get to work. How can I deal with this? I need to support my parents, I need to look after them, they rely on me. And as you go through, you're seeing how they react to him not being well and the resentment that they treat him because of that. And it's like, well, he's your son. Like, I get it, he's your source of income, but also he's your son, give him a break. And that's kind of what it's criticising through him being transformed into this giant bug. So it is interesting from that point of view. However, I was reading this more for enjoyment than thinking critically, and as a result, enjoyment wise, it wasn't there. I couldn't quite get on with the writing, so that was a DNF. I like a weird book, but maybe not with turning into bugs, and that could also be because I don't actually like bugs. We also have 2 books that I'm in the middle of reading. So one is Mother of Death and Dawn. This is by Carissa Broadbent. It is the 3rd book in a series. Not going to talk about it much because the 2nd book I will be talking about in a moment. So far I am enjoying this one, however I much preferred the 2nd book. This one just seems a little bit long and drawn out. It will be finishing it, but it will be in June's wrap up. And I also have a book where you will not have any thoughts on this one at all, but safe to say that I am halfway through. It's great, I love it, it's amazing. And this is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. It hasn't been mentioned in any of my reading vlogs because I am working on a secret vlog, and that will be coming out probably in July, but this has been a very good time and I am halfway through, annotating and loving it. Keep your eyes peeled for that if you're interested in more thoughts, but I think that will be July time. But that being said, let's get to all the books that I have finished, starting off with the ebooks as always. Okay, so the first one I read was actually a fan fiction, which is my first fan fiction, and this is Manacled by Sue Lynn Tan, and this was a Hermione fan fiction, which is a Hermione and Draco Malfoy fan fiction, so it was obviously based in the world of Harry Potter, but this is what if the last book never happened and instead Harry lost and Voldemort won. It's very dark. Check your trigger warnings. Pretty much every trigger warning is in there, and I did enjoy parts of this a lot. However, it is very long, it's very drawn out, and there are parts that I don't like. It is quoted as Harry Potter meets, what's the name of that book? By Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale. The Purebloods have won, and they are now using everyone that was fighting against Voldemort, all the witches, to be breeders because the wizarding race is like, well, not doing so well, so they need to breed. I mean, I liked it. I liked the romance between Hermione and Draco, the way that was all developing. I liked the flashbacks because we see the flashbacks where they're in the war, the morals, and seeing how Hermione was questioning things like, if we're going to win, we can't be using only defensive magic, we need to really fight out against things. I didn't enjoy the parts where, I mean, it's a bit of a spoiler, so I'm not going to go into it, but I mentioned it during my weekly vlog, and certain parts of it I personally have no interest in, and so when they were coming up I was like, oh, this is a bit like, let's skip through this. So I think, to be honest, it's going to be a pass. It was my first fanfiction, as I mentioned, and I think it was a good time, but still a pass because I wouldn't reread it, and there were moments where I was skipping through. I then read Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas, and this I read for Jan's book club. She has a full moon book club. I'm also part of her Patreon, so I kind of choose between which book club pick I want to read, and Catherine House was the one that really intrigued me. This is a dark academia weird book, everything I like. We're following our main character, and she ends up going to this really elite school called Catherine House. Once she's there, she's realizing that actually everything really isn't as it seems, and they're doing this weird experimentation, and she questions like what is right about it. It's a really good book because she's like, well, I'm running away from stuff, I've got nothing to go back to, so I just have to accept that this is what it is. It's given me a good opportunity. When I finish this school, I'm going to be able to come out and be somebody, and that's what everyone there is. They're all running away from something and just wanting to become somebody else, but also some of them, their parents used to go there, and so it's like a prestigious thing, like you have to go there. It's an interesting one. I really liked it. I also got told it's actually a retelling of Bluebeard, which is like part what inspired this book, so now I'm really intrigued to read that one. I don't know much about Bluebeard. I did a quick summary, and that explains a lot about a section in the book, and I think that's great, so I definitely need to read that. But overall, I really enjoyed this one. It is a weird book. It's kind of like Vita Nostra. I do think Vita Nostra does it a little bit better, but I still enjoyed this. But it is on the weird end, so if you don't like the weird dark academia books like Bunny and Vita Nostra, then maybe this one isn't for you. I really enjoyed this, so this is definitely a smash. And I then had Children of Fallen Gods by Carissa Broadbent. This is the second book in the series, and I really like this series. It's really good. It's just a really good fantasy series. Like, if you're getting into adult fantasy, this is a good place to start, I think. We're following two main characters. You have Tisana and Max. Tisana is someone that's running away, being a slave. She finally raised enough money to buy her freedom, but her master was like, what the hell, and almost kills her for this insubordination that she does. She runs away, and she's run into the separate country called Ara, where she believes she's going to be able to go and muster up an army to then come back and save all the other slaves. However, that does not go to plan, and instead they're like, no, you've got to do stuff for us. Then we come to Max, and Max is someone who used to work for the army of Ara, has since gone, I'm not involved anymore because of the actions that happened. It's a very morally grey story. It really looks into war, the side of how it is just opinions. Both sides have their opinions of, we're doing better for this cause, and it's a really interesting look at that, and as it says, it's only the victors that write the history, so it's a good book. I really enjoyed it. The twists, the plot twists in this were fantastic and kept me hooked to the point where I wanted to pick up the third book straight away. It's just a shame that this third book that I'm currently reading is a little bit slower and a little bit drawn out, but the second book, smash, 100%. I loved it. Okay, then we have all the physical book. One that's a pass, which technically is a sort of DNF, and that's The Magic Toy Shop by Angela Carter. I say sort of DNF because I did finish, but I skim read. This is a book I took with me to Comic-Con. I was reading it across the weekend, and it's okay. I just couldn't really get invested in the story. We're following Malene, and she is going through puberty. She also has to deal with losing her parents, and how that sidelines her whole life, and everything that she had hoped that she would achieve in her life is now so drastically different. Dealing with it at a time where she had loads of money, and now she's going to relatives that don't really have that much money, and the things that they do she sees as lesser, and she doesn't like it. She's having to get used to everything. She also has an uncle with extremely bad anger manga issues who only loves the toys that he creates, and it's very kind of eerie. I feel like the atmosphere was done really well, but I couldn't get on with the character. Like, I feel it was too detached for me to care about what was going on, which is a bit of a shame. But overall, this is going to be a pass because I just couldn't get invested. And for me, I'm such a character driven person that if I can't get on with the characters, I'm not going to enjoy the book as much, which is frustrating. Bit of a shame, as I want to read more of Angela Carter. Like, she's got some tales where she does darker retellings of fairy tales, which I think would be really interesting to read. I still may give it a go, but probably not for a while based on this book. You'll have to let me know, like, if you've read both, if you think it was better. Fairy tale fun. But yeah, it was fine. It's just nothing to write home about for me. A book that I have really enjoyed is Ocean's Echo by Everina Maxwell. This is a sci-fi romance and I loved this. I will say the ending did leave me a bit like question mark because some of the stuff that was happening, and I don't know whether I just wasn't following very well, but a couple of the things that happened were a bit like, oh, okay, this is happening now, and it didn't feel like it flowed, but overall, I really enjoyed this. This is my first proper foray into adult sci-fi. I've tried one other adult sci-fi book and could not get on with it, so I'm really pleased that I like this one. This one was a lot more focused on like political drama. We're following two main characters. One is Tennel. His aunt is a lieutenant who's just kind of fed up with him and can't think of anything to do with him, and so she conscripts him into the army against his will. He is also a reader, and readers are able to read other people's emotions, and this is really looked down upon. You're not meant to read other people's emotions at all. It's terrible. It's blacklisted. You're not allowed to do this, and if you are a reader, you best keep quiet about it. So her way of dealing with Tennel is to send him off to the army, but also get him a sink. Now, if you are in sync with an architect, that architect can write you. This is the other telekinetic powers. Being written is where they are able to get you to do something that you don't want to do. If somebody said to you, you need to stop what you're doing, you don't have a choice, you have to stop. I don't understand why that's any better than someone being able to read your emotions, but there we go. It's very warped. Again, this is illegal because Tennel doesn't want to do it, and the person that gets told that he has to do the sync with the architect, Lieutenant Surratt, is amazing. He is absolutely lovely. He is so adamant about what is right and wrong. He sticks to his guns about it. He's lovely. I loved him as a character, and then Tennel is this kind of cannonball, chaotic character. It was a great pairing. Really enjoyed it. And then you have the deeper political things that are going on. It's great. It's so interesting, so expansive. I definitely want to get the other book, which is Winter's Orbit. They're both set in the same universe. You can read them as standalones. I'm seeing that without reading Winter's Orbit, maybe if I'd read Winter's Orbit, I would have understood a couple things a little bit better, but for me personally, I thought it was fine on its own. Really enjoyed this one. It's also one of the most inclusive books I have ever read. Highly recommend. This was a smash, and if you have any more recommendations like Ocean's Echo, please let me know. Okay, changing tracks a bit, we have the first non-fiction book that I've read for the year, A Life on Our Planet by David Attenborough. This is his witness statement and vision for the future. This book is broken down into a couple of parts. The first part is following David Attenborough's life, what he's been up to working for the BBC, everything he's done within working with nature. It's incredible. I loved that bit of the book. Probably my absolute favourite. So beautiful. The writing was glorious. I actually tabbed a few things because I just found it beautiful. The next bit is then talking about what we've done to our planet and how terrifying it is, and the future that is going to happen unless we start making changes now. That was truly terrifying to read, some of the things that were happening, and also devastating in a really eye-opening way. So I mentioned this in my weekly reading vlog when I was talking about this book, but I kind of live in my own little bubble. I don't watch the news, I don't pay attention to things like that. If it's not on BookTube and it's not in a book, I'm probably not going to know it's happening, and I like living in my little bubble. So this was a really eye-opening experience, something that I knew things were going on, like climate change and things like that, but this does it in such a way that I was like realising how bad it is, which might sound really silly, but if it's not something you're paying attention to, then anyway, that was a genuinely terrifying part of the book. And then the last part of the book is focusing on how we can improve, the different things that we can put into place to reverse the damage that we're doing, which was really, really fascinating. Now, I will admit I did find parts of that bit a bit hard to read, and I had to slow down in my reading. Some of it was a bit science heavy, so I had to try and wrap my mind around it, but other stuff was really easy, like having a mainly plant-based diet and things like this. Very interesting read, very fascinating. Would recommend. This was a smash. I thought it was really, really good, and I'm pleased I read this as my first non-fiction for the year. A book that I was terrified to read but ended up liking was Lord of the Rings, and this is by J.R. Tolkien. So obviously this is part 1, The Fellowship of the Ring. Lord of the Rings was actually meant to be first published as one big book, but at the time the publishers were like, nope, this is too big, so we're gonna publish it separately in 3 volumes. I actually listened to an audiobook of this that I found on YouTube, and oh my god, was it the best experience ever. It was fantastic. It was such a cinematic production. Like, you had music going on. If they were in like the pub, you had the background noise of being in the tavern, points where things were getting really dark and dangerous and stuff. Like, it felt like music from the actual film, and that's one of the things that I loved is growing up watching those films. The music that they did with it was fantastic. Like, it remains some of my favourite music to listen to, and so having that while I was reading this book was so good. So yes, I loved the audiobook experience. I will say it's probably the audiobook experience that has amped up my enjoyment of this, because there are so many songs in this book, which is great because it adds to learning about hobbits and elves, their community. But I hate reading songs. Like, it's just not something I can do, but listening to it was beautiful. I loved that so much. Also, the descriptions in here make this a perfect springtime read. The descriptions of Hobbiton and everything that they're doing, and the walks through all the forests and stuff, are just so beautifully done. J.R. Tolkien is a master at writing nature. It's so well done. Although I know in the next book apparently it does go on a little bit much. Like, I have to admit, there were times in this where I was like, oh, this is a bit dense. I'm really pleased that I'm listening to it, but I still really enjoyed this. So I definitely think I will be getting the next 2, but I think I would stick to listening to them on audiobook because it was just a beautiful way to do it. Really, really pleased. So that is a smash, but audiobook, highly recommend. Okay, I think actually the last 3 are also smashes. So we have The Ladies of Grace Adieu and Other Stories by Susanna Clarke. This is a short story collection, and I really enjoyed this one. Different short stories, some of them related back to things that were happening in Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. One story in particular has a particular scene that was in that book that's then expanded upon in here, which I really enjoyed. I loved the look at English folklore and tales of witches, and it was so good for that. I really enjoyed it. The way it's written is amazing. I love Susanna Clarke's writing. She's one of my favourite authors, and it also had illustrations. This book had everything that I loved. Absolutely everything. I would highly recommend this if you like Susanna Clarke, or you're a bit intimidated to read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, then also give this one a try. It's a really good indicator of what her writing is like, so you know what you're getting in for. Beautiful. Absolute smash. Loved it. Absolutely loved it, as I've said. Then we have a manga, which is Children of the Whales Volume 1, and I liked this one. This is more of a tentative smash, peck on the lip. The artwork is stunning, the story is interesting, and I do want to continue, but probably not anytime soon. In this one, we're following an archivist, and he keeps the records for everyone living on the back of this mud whale. Something's happened to the planet where it's just mud everywhere. And so to stay alive on this city, they are on a moving city on the back of a whale. In this city, there are people that have different markings on their skin, and if you are marked, then you are able to use your energy to do different things. However, you are very short-lived as a result. Now, they believe they are the last of civilization until they discover a girl on this abandoned ship and realise that they're not the last at all. And at the very end of the book, it's very interesting. It seems like they were kept prisoner on this floating mud whale. We don't know why. So I'm really intrigued. Like I say, I do want to continue, but I have a few other volumes of mangas that I'm in the middle of, and I'd like to continue with those first, but I will continue on with this one eventually. So like I said, a light smash, peck on the lips. And then another one which for me was a smash is The Castle of Orantaro by Horace Walpole. So this was written in 1764. So it's an old book, and it is dated. You can tell that. So for a modern day reader, there are going to be points in this book which you roll your eyes at, and for me, I just found it funny as a result. So there are points where women are too sensitive to deal with certain things, and so they faint every time. every single time. It's hilarious, but you do have to see it with that funny side to it. If you're taking it too seriously, then yes, it's going to be annoying and frustrating as a modern day reader, but if you take it with that's the way it was at the time, it's just funny. This book is what is argued as the first supernatural story within England, and it's so funny. It's so funny. There are moving portraits, there's ghosts in suits of armour, there is so much going on, and you can definitely see how this book has influenced so many other things like the haunted house slash haunted castle trope, the ghosts in general, and I love seeing how that has influenced other books, how this would have been so shocking at the time, of the first of its kind to come out with something like this, and then how it's created this genre of books that inspired authors. Absolutely amazing, and I love reading books for that. I love seeing the inspirations behind things, seeing how this inspired later authors, which then have inspired other authors, which just continues down to modern day authors, and I love that. So I had two enjoyments from this book. One for seeing that, seeing how it has brought about the start of a genre, and two, just for this sheer fun time that I had reading this, because it is so dramatic, so over the top, it is actually ridiculous. As a base level, we're following our main character, but it's kind of told from an omniscient narrator, so you don't really technically have a main character, but you have this prince and his son dies, and he was going to be married to this princess, and he is like, oh my god, I must have a son, I must continue my legacy, and so he's like, well, I will marry the princess, and this poor princess is like, what the hell? No you won't, you're old. And so she runs off into the castle in horror at this. Also, he has a wife, and so she's like, you can't do this, you are already married, you can't just have another wife, that's not the way it works. And so yeah, she runs off into the castle and strange stuff happens. I mean, if you look at it from that sort of thing, it's actually quite a dark tale, but it's written in such an overly dramatic way, I found it hilarious. So that is a smash. And that's it for this month. I haven't done loads of reading. Like, if we actually look at the stat, it's not that big for me. It's really not. But add in the 3 ebooks, me being halfway through an ebook and a physical book, and it's not bad. It's not a bad month. I've enjoyed it overall, which is nice. I feel like I say that at the end of most read and wrap-ups, that overall I enjoyed it, and I just feel so accomplished because I got all the books read off my TBR plus a few extra ones, so I'm really happy with it. Let me know what you have read in the month of May, what your favourite one is, if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, or if you want to, but I think we'll leave it there. Actually, you know what, for this video, let's leave a ghost emoji in the comments below for the Castle of Orantaro and all those ghostly doings. It was so funny. So a ghost in the emoji, I say that every time. A ghost in the comments below if you've made it this far, and thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please do give it that thumbs up, subscribe and comment. Those 3 things are so helpful to helping this channel grow. I really appreciate it. My social media links and anyone I've mentioned will of course be linked below, and I will catch you in the next video.